Hello and welcome to Attack of the Famiclones HD. In this fifth and final look at the Super Retro Trio, I'm going to be talking about what my overall final thoughts are of the system. If you somehow missed the previous parts, you can click the annotations right here to go take you to those videos. Part 1 was the overview and what the system is. Part 2 talked about the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive. Part 3 talked about the Super Nintendo and the Super Famicom. And Part 4 talked about the NES and Famicom. So like I said before, this video is going to be my final thoughts on the Super Retro Trio. Now, I'll get right into it. As a guy who collects a lot of different clones, the Super Retro Trio has got to be the most feature-packed, dedicated hardware clone system I've ever come across. The sheer variety of things that you can do with this clone is just staggering. If you think about it, this clone can run 9 different formats of games. First of all, you can run your Sega Genesis games from North America. You can also run your Mega Drive games from either Europe or Japan or other nations. This happens to be a Japanese Mega Drive game. You can also run, although I didn't show it in any of the videos, Mega Drive or Master System games. Master System games will play through a pin adapter, which you can put into the Sega Genesis slot. And if you have a pin adapter, that's just all there is to it. Clones such as this one will play Master System games, and they work, fairly well. But for me personally, I don't like to run Master System games on Genesis systems, and that's because the Genesis, no matter what you do with it, can't run or can't be modded to run the YM2413, which is the FM sound channel synthesizer that you can install into a real Master System. With that chip, games like Phantasy Star, which I've shown right here, sound so much better, and once you hear how good they sound, you'll never want to go back to just the PCM garbage of, or the PSG garbage of just what you typically would get with an unmodded system, or with the Sega Genesis. So, but anyway, that's just one game that will work. So that's 3 formats so far. Then it will run, of course, your Super Nintendo games, and Super Famicom games. You can also run original Game Boy games through the Super Game Boy. And if you buy the Super Retro Advance adapter, you can run Game Boy Advance games. But it's not over yet. You can still run, in addition to that, NES games, and, through an adapter, Famicom games. So that's 9 different formats. As well as all that, you can also run the Mega EverDrive, even though this is, says World Series Baseball, but it actually is. This is the Mega EverDrive. Modded. The Super Power Pack, and the Famicom EverDrive. Through all of these different formats, you can run so many different games. It's really just staggering. In addition to that, because the system has so many different controller ports, you can use your original NES controllers, Super Nintendo controllers, Sega Genesis controllers, and you can even use the controllers that it comes with, which are these Genesis clone controllers that look like Super Nintendo controllers and play like Super Nintendo controllers. These controllers really are one of the best things about the system. And because these work as Genesis controllers, you can actually use these on a real Sega Genesis. So if you have a Genesis lying around, you can use this controller on the original hardware, and that's again just one of these bonus things that you can do with the Sega Genesis. You can also use this controller to play Atari 2600, or you can use it with, say, like the Commodore 64 and things like that. You can use the Super Nintendo clone controller to play, 2600 games. That's crazy cool, in my opinion. And in addition to that, these controllers are really, really good. Retrobit has really done a 180 from, having such terrible controllers with, say, the Retro Duo to this thing, which is just quite fantastic. I don't know if I necessarily like this controller better than the Super Retro controllers, which came with the Retro Duo Portable, but the two controllers are very, very good. So yeah, hands down, Retrobit really knows their stuff when it comes to clone controllers. These things are fantastic, and let it be known that should Retrobit sell these things by themselves, and you don't need to buy the Super Retro Trio by itself, should they do that, these controllers are highly recommended. They are Genesis controllers, keep in mind, not actual Super Nintendo controllers, but they are fantastic. So much so that the more I use them, the more I actually prefer to use this controller than an OEM Sega Genesis 6-button controller. They're really that good. Now, talking about the different sides of the system, the Genesis side plays Sega Genesis games quite well. It runs through S-Video, which is just quite fantastic. Even through Composite, the Composite's video signal, just like the standalone Retro Gen adapter, it produces composite video that is immensely cleaner and better looking than what you'd find on a real Sega Genesis, no matter what model you go for. Even the XI, it's crazy stuff like that. The composite video on this system, through all three systems in fact, is really quite good. And in addition to that, it also has S-Video natively. It's not RGB or anything crazy like that, so you're not going to get 240p, or you're not going to get anything that's really, really good. But through S-Video and Composite, even Composite, I was really surprised when I tested the Genesis side, because the difference between Composite and S-Video on the Genesis side is only very slight, especially if you use a CRT. Now, for all these videos, I've been demonstrating them running on an HDTV because, simply easier to film an HDTV as it doesn't have, rolling scan lines. But using this system on a CRT you're going to get quite a fantastic picture. Even the NES side, which passes just composite video through the S-Video line, it looks great on a CRT. This system has just fantastic video output. The NES part, even stock, when it has somewhat dark colors, even that doesn't look all that bad, although you can just simply improve it by removing a single resistor and then bridging the connection there with solder. It's very, very easy to do. But even if you don't do that and you leave the system completely stock, you're still going to get quite fantastic video output. As well, it has stereo output, and this is something that is a bit. It's kind of important for people who have really good sound systems or stuff like that, because you're getting not a mono systems on any of them. The NES side was originally mono, but what you're getting here is dual mono on the NES, so you have both the left and right channels producing sound, which is something you wouldn't get on the original NES 001 hardware, because it only had the single mono sound output through RCA, or through RF, I guess. The SNES side, unlike some of Hyperkin's clones, is not mono either. It's fully stereo, and you have the left channel being the left channel, the right channel being the right channel. They're not reversed. There's nothing screwed up there. So the audio sounds great. On the NES side, unfortunately, my system has a bad audio processor unit. Which means that you're going to get weird effects in certain games. But even with that said, I own something like 400 NES games, and I've tested every single one of them on the Super Retro Trio, and only about 5 games out of that 400 games have this sound problem. The Castlevania 2, Castlevania 3, Crystallis. Those are the 3 that I can think of at the top of my head. The vast majority of games will not have any sort of sound issues at all. So even if you get a system that has bad sound, it's still not that big of a deal. Now, the other thing that I got to talk about that is very obvious is that having one system that does all these different games that it runs, your Sega Genesis, your Mega Drive, your Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, NES, Famicom. You have your Super Game Boy, you have your Game Boy games. You have the Super Retro Advance. If you have a pin adapter for the Genesis, you can run Master System games. Through all of these different formats, putting this one system, in your entertainment unit just saves you so much space, and actually it's easier to run, especially if you're more of a casual gamer than you are super hardcore. Of course, the clone system is never going to replace the original hardware, but I think that for people who are looking to just have one thing as opposed to having multiple consoles, this is just the best clone there is on the market. And certain small things that are really nice when you get to people who have multiple systems like me. This is the original power supply for a Sega Genesis Model 1. It also works with the Japanese it also works with the Master System. It also works with the Japanese Famicom. It can be powered the NES. It can power a North American Japanese Super Famicom. It can power the PC Engine. This thing can do a whole lot. However, it's huge, and it's also heavy, and it's inefficient. If you leave this plugged in, it will heat up. It's just wastes the voltage that it receives. It's a massive power supply. Meanwhile, the Super Retro Trio comes with this power supply. This thing is light, it's tiny, and it's energy efficient. This is a 5-volt power supply that will be, producing regulated voltage, and it just shows you, through the passage of time, how much better technology has gotten. You're still getting the same power supply, but this one here and this one do the same job, but this one's a lot smaller, it's a lot cheaper, it feels, solidly built still, but it doesn't heat up, and it's more efficient than using this hulking old thing. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can use these kind of things, they also take up a whole lot of space in a wall socket or a power strip, whereas this one does not at all, because it goes sideways. It doesn't actually go vertically, so it doesn't take up slots that way. It takes them this way. So it's just a much better design. So, my final thoughts on the Super Retro Trio. The Super Retro Trio is gotta be the best clone that's ever been made so far. People have been asking me whether it's worth picking up a console like this, or they should wait for, say, Hyperkin Retron 5. Well, the Hyperkin Retron 5 is a very different beast. It's more comparable to the Ouya than it is anything else. These clones are based upon their original hardware, and if something's wrong with them, you can fix them through various means. Whereas the Retron 5 will be emulation based, so if there's any problems, you have to wait around for Hyperkin to release firmware updates, or you have to wait till someone hacks it and stuff like that. So because of that, if you're looking for a hardware based clone, you can't go wrong with the Super Retro Trio. This really is the best clone on the market, and yeah. So with that, I'll leave it with you guys as which one you guys want to buy. If you want to buy this, or if you want to wait for the Retron 5, or if you want to just buy an Ouya. All three of them have their pros and cons, and as I get as I get more and more knowledge about clone systems, I start to notice certain things that can be fixed, or certain things that can be that are worth talking about. So I appreciate all of you guys who have been supporting me so far and watching these kind of videos, because really these kind of videos are what I enjoy doing the most out of anything I do. And so, yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll get back with the Console Classic series right away again, so, please keep supporting me. And once again, I'll see you guys next time.